popular Greek mythology stories today. And you want to start this with the Odyssey. First part, Odysseus and the end of the Trojan War. The story begins with the conclusion of the Trojan War, a 10-year conflict sparked by the abduction of Helen of Troy. Odysseus played a pivotal role in the Greeks' victory, devising the ingenious strategy of the Trojan horse, which allowed Greek soldiers to infiltrate and ultimately defeat the city of Troy. However, his journey was far from over. Odysseus' cleverness had earned him both fame and the enmity of certain gods, setting the stage for his arduous voyage home. First, the curse of Poseidon. As Odysseus set sail for Ithaca, he incurred the wrath of Poseidon, the god of the sea, by blinding his son, the Cyclops, named Polyphemus. In retaliation, Poseidon cursed Odysseus to wander the seas for years, preventing him from returning home and subjecting him to numerous trials and tribulations. Second part, the trials of Odysseus. The island of the Lotus Eaters. One of the first challenges Odysseus and his crew faced was on the island of the Lotus Eaters. The inhabitants offered his men the lotus fruit, which caused them to forget the desire to return home. Recognizing the danger, Odysseus forced his men back onto the ship, saving them from a life of oblivion. Second, the encounter with the Cyclops. Continuing their journey, they arrived at the land of the Cyclops. Seeking hospitality, they entered the cave of Polyphemus. It proved to be a brutal host. Trapped inside, Odysseus devised a plan to escape by intoxicating the Cyclops with a lotus and blinding him with a sharpened stake. As they fled, Odysseus' pride led him to reveal his true name, allowing Polyphemus to call upon Poseidon to curse him. Third, the sirens Scylla and Charybdis. The voyage brought them past the alluring songs of the sirens, whose voices lured sailors to their doom. Odysseus plucked his men's ears with beeswax and had himself tied to the mast to hear the song without succumbing. The challenges included navigating between the monstrous Scylla and the whirlpool Charybdis, losing men to Scylla's ravenous heads, but ultimately steering clear of total destruction. Fourth, the island of Circe. On the island of Circe, a powerful sorceress, Odysseus' men were transformed into swine. Thankfully, with the help of the god Hermes, Odysseus resisted Circe's magic and convinced her to restore his men. They stayed on the island for a year, enjoying her hospitality before resuming their quest. Fifth, the land of the dead. As per Circe's advice, Odysseus journeyed to the underworld to seek the prophet Tiresias' guidance, where there he communicated with the spirits of the dead, including his fallen comrades and his own mother, learning crucial information for his return to Ithaca. Next part, the return to Ithaca. First subpart, Calypso's Island. After losing all his men due to a transgression against the sun god Helios, Odysseus washed ashore on the island of Ogygia, home to the nymph Calypso. She detained him for 7 years, offering immortality if he stayed. Longing for home, Odysseus was eventually released by the order of Zeus, conveyed by Hermes. Second subpart, Reunion and Revenge. Returning to Ithaca disguised as a beggar, Odysseus found his palace overrun by suitors vying for his wife Penelope's hand. With the help of his son Telemachus and the goddess Athena, he orchestrated a plan to reclaim his home. Revealing his identity, Odysseus defeated the suitors in a dramatic showdown, reuniting with Penelope after 20 long years. Now, let's move on to one of the most tragic love stories in Greek mythology. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice. As it is only fitting, Orpheus, the father of songs and the supreme musician in Greek mythology, was the son of one of the Muses, generally said to be Calliope, by either Apollo or the Thracian king Oeagrus. Be that as it may, we know for sure that Orpheus got a golden lyre as a gift from Apollo when just a child, and that it was the god himself who taught him how to play it in such a beautiful manner. Moreover, his mother showed him how to add verses to the music, and his 8 aunts how to polish them to perfection in every single style known to man. So when Orpheus was a young man, as Shakespeare writes, his golden touch could soften steel and stones, make tigers tame, and huge leviathans forsake unsounded deeps to dance on sands. Loved by many, but this young man loved only the beautiful Eurydice, and she loved him back. This is the story of their tragic love. After presiding over the curious marriage of Ivis and Dianthe, veiled in a saffron mantle, Hymen, the Greek god of marriage, departed swiftly for the land of the Ciconians, located in the south coast of Thrace. There, he was supposed to take part in the festivities of yet another famous wedding, that of the darlings of the ancient world, Orpheus and Eurydice. However, for some reason, he was not at his usual best during the ceremony. He even forgot to bless the happy couple, bemused by the fact that he couldn't light his torch, which merely sputtered and filled the eyes of the present with smoke. Little did he, or anyone else for that matter, knew that this is an ominous foreboding. Unfortunately, the end of this couple would be even worse than the sign. The death of Eurydice. Soon after the marriage, Eurydice died of a snake bite. Different authors tell different stories as to what led to the fatal encounter. According to the most repeated story, Eurydice fell into a serpent nest after trying to escape from a certain Aristeus, a shepherd who began to chase her through the forest as soon as he laid eyes upon her otherworldly beauty. Others, however, say that Aristeus didn't even exist, and that Eurydice was merely strolling through the woods with the naiads when a serpent sunk its poisonous teeth in her soft ankle. In any case, Eurydice died instantly, and her soul descended into the underworld. Orpheus' descent into Hades. Orpheus leaves the earth. When Orpheus found the body of his wife, he so mourned her death that, as Ovid says, he filled the highs of the heaven with the moans of his lament. His grief-stricken song touched the gods and the nymphs so much that some of them, possibly Apollo himself, not only suggested that he should go into the kingdom of the dead and ask back for the soul of his wife, but also gave him tips on how to reach safely its rulers, namely Hades and Persephone. Upon finding of this possibility, Orpheus immediately headed to the Taenarum in Laconia, where he passed through one of the few earthly entrances to the underworld. And as soon as he got there, he began to sing this song, which I will not sing. I will simply recite as if it were a poem. O deities of this dark world beneath the earth, I come not down here because of curiosity to see the gleams of Tartarus. I have come because my darling wife stepped on a viper that sent through her veins death poison, cutting off her coming years. You may not know love down here, but I do. By this place of fear, this huge void, and these vast silent realms, renew the life thread of my loving Eurydice. After all, one day, when grey and old and full of age, she shall be yours yet again, and forevermore. All I ask of you is just a few years of her life as a boon. But if the fates deny to me this prayer, then I do not want to go back, and may triumph in the death of two. This song of Orpheus charmed the hearts of both Charon and Cerberus, to an extent that they allowed the poet to enter the abode of Hades and Persephone without even worrying about the possible consequences. Needless to add, they weren't the only ones touched by Orpheus' dirge. It is said that the bloodless ghosts themselves started weeping, and the Tantalus forgot all about his thirst and hunger. The Danaans ceased filling their pitchers with water, and Sisyphus could be seen sitting idly on a stone, and even the unconscious and inanimate objects were moved. So the vultures broke off eating Titus's liver, and the wheel of Ixion suddenly stopped turning, standing wonder-bound in place. And then, for the first time in all of known history, the cheeks of the Erinyes were wet with tears. Fortunately for Orpheus, Hades and Persephone were moved to tears as well, and they couldn't bear to refuse his pleas, allowing Orpheus to take Eurydice with him back to earth on one condition only: that he should not look back at her until both of them regained the light of the sun. Now, this wasn't an easy task. You see, Orpheus knew full well that no man was ever allowed to visit the underworld twice, and he was now on his way out of it. Furthermore, he hadn't seen Eurydice, not once, and he didn't even know whether she was following him at all. He just had to take the word of Hades for it. So, as he was nearing the exit of the realm of the dead, in fear that he might once again lose his wife, and anxious for a single look, Orpheus turned his eyes so he could gaze upon Eurydice. Almost immediately she slipped away, and the air was all Orpheus could feel between his arms as he stretched them out, eager to embrace and rescue the love of his life. A moment later, the walls of the underworld echoed a whispered and sorrowful farewell. And then there was only silence and despair. Orpheus tried to go back, but this time, not even his singing could soothe Charon, the infernal boatman. For 7 days, Orpheus sat at the bank of the river Styx, nourished only by his grief and tears, until he became all but a voiceless skeleton. Finally, he wandered back to Earth, and for the next 3 days he roamed his homeland, shunning all women. It was probably because of this that the Thracian women, or the Maenads, resenting Orpheus for his fidelity to the curse of Eurydice, tore him to pieces during one of their frenzied ceremonies. The Muses gathered his limbs and buried them in Pieria. The nightingales were said to sing more beautifully upon his grave than in any place in all of Greece. They couldn't find his head though. The Maenads had previously thrown it into the river Hebrus, where it went on singing while floating down the stream, until the islanders of Lesbos found it and buried it. It is said that this is the reason why so many poets were born then during the following few centuries. Not much is said about Orpheus' shade, however. Not few, and we certainly among them, would like to believe that it reunited with the shade of Eurydice in the underworld, because love conquers all, even death. Adventures of Perseus. Perseus' life was a very interesting one, full of adventures. He was the son of the god Zeus and Danae. His reputation and character quickly turned him into a local hero of Argos. Arceus, the grandfather of Perseus, had asked an oracle if he would ever have any kids. The answer he got was shocking and led him to live in a life of paranoia. He was told that his daughter would have a son that would eventually kill him. Arceus, driven by the force of fear, had his daughter Danae jailed in an underground cave with brass walls. Nevertheless, the mighty Zeus, who had an eye for beauty and a way with women, few dared to compete, had already spotted the beautiful maiden. He transformed into a shower of golden rain and entered the cave where Danae was held. Through their union, Danae gave birth to a baby boy that she managed to keep secret for some time. It wasn't long there that an angry father found out about the baby. He refused to believe that Zeus had anything to do with it, so he condemned Danae's nurse to death, as he believed that she orchestrated this affair. He thought about killing his grandson himself, but his guilt will not let him. Desperately seeking a solution that would pose no danger to his life, he made up his mind. He had a wooden ark built for his daughter and his grandson, and he immediately ordered the two of them to be placed in it and to be set adrift at sea. Days and nights passed, Danae and her baby barely alive. Eventually, the wooden ark washed up in the island of Seriphus. There, a fisherman named Dictys, who was the brother of Polydectes, the ruler of the island, found it. He kindly took in young Perseus and his mother and shared his home with them. During this time, Perseus grew into a strong, brave man, blessed with many talents, undoubtedly the result of God's grace. However, Polydectes fell in love with Danae, and Perseus, wanting to protect her, kept his mother under guard at all times. So, the irritated Polydectes devised a plan. He invited some friends for dinner and asked them what gift they would bring him if he was ever to ask for one. Perseus answered that if it was necessary, he would bring the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, to him. Now, Medusa was a fearsome monster who turned to stone anyone who would be unlucky to stare her in the eyes. The king agreed and asked Perseus to bring him the head of the Medusa. Otherwise, he would take his mother by force. Perseus, left with no choice, set forth on his adventure to get Medusa's head. The gods, of course, who love to intervene in the affairs of mortals, would not leave Perseus helpless. Both Athena and Hermes set out to help Perseus with his challenge. With his intelligence and wit, Perseus managed to trick the nymphs. They gave him winged sandals so he could fly above the ground, a bag so he could carry the head of the Medusa, and the helmet of Hades, which would make him invisible. Using the winged sandals, Perseus flew above Medusa, looking only at her reflection, using the shiny shield that Athena had given him. Invisible thanks to Hades' helmet, Perseus cut Medusa's head off, placed it in the bag, and set for home. On his way home, he met Andromeda, whom he rescued from a sea monster. They quickly fell in love and decided to get married. However, Andromeda's uncle, who wanted her for himself, disagreed and plotted to murder Perseus. Having Medusa's head gave Perseus a great advantage. He took out the head, and as soon as Andromeda's uncle looked at it, he turned into stone. When Perseus arrived home, he did the same thing with Polydectes, who was harassing Danae, Perseus' mother. Now, what happened to Odysseus, the grandfather of Perseus, though? After all, it was prophesied that Perseus would eventually kill him. Well, upon hearing of Perseus' achievements, he fled far away. But that wasn't enough to escape his fate. Much he attended at a game ceremony in the city of Larissa, which was arranged by King Diomedes. Perseus participated in the event. When it was his turn to throw the discus, it slipped from his hand and hit his grandfather on the head, killing him. He felt so bad. But when Perseus found out it was his grandfather he had killed, he understood it was prophesied and buried him with honor. Are you familiar with the birth of Athena? Zeus came to lust after Medes and chased her in his direct way. Medes tried to escape, going so fast to change her form many times. She changed into various creatures, such as hawks, fish, and serpents. However, Zeus was both determined and equally proficient at changing form. He continued his pursuit until she relented. What a jerk. There was a prophecy. An oracle of Gaia then prophesied that Medes' first child would be a girl, and that her second child would be a boy that would overthrow Zeus, similar to what had happened to his father and grandfather. Zeus took this warning to heart. When he next saw Medes, he initially flattered her and put her at ease. Then, with Medes' guards down, Zeus opened his mouth and swallowed her and her unborn child. This was the end of Medes, but also the beginning of Zeus's wisdom. After a time, Zeus developed an unbearable headache, which made him scream out of pain so loudly it could be heard throughout the earth. The other gods came to see what the problem was. Hermes realized what needed to be done and directed Hephaestus to take a wedge and split open Zeus's skull. Out of the skull sprung Athena, fully grown and in her full set of armor. Due to the way of her birth, she became the goddess of intelligence and wisdom. Athena's name is closely linked with the name of the city of Athens. The ancient Greeks debated whether she got her name after the city or the other way around. Modern scholars usually agree that the former was the case. In art and literature, Athena is usually depicted as a majestic lady with a beautiful but stern face, unsmiling full lips, grey eyes, and a graceful build, emanating power and authority. She is always regally clad in either a chiton or full armor. In the former case, she is sometimes represented with a spindle. In the latter case, she wears an elaborately crusted Corinthian helmet and holds a long spear in one hand and an aegis in the other. At the center of her aegis there's oftentimes an image of a Gorgon's head, Gorgonian, symbolizing the gift she got from Perseus, the head of Medusa. Just like Medusa's eyes, Athena's shield can also turn her enemies into stone. As a symbol of her wisdom, there's often an owl flying in Athena's vicinity, or sitting on her shoulder. From time to time there may also be a snake or an olive branch. Athena was one of the most important Olympian gods, and she had many functions. Unsurprisingly, she was known under many different epithets. Some of the most famous were Virgin, Perseus, the Unbearing One, the One of the City, the One with Gleaming Eyes, and the One who fights in front. Have you heard of the Argonauts before? The Argonauts were a number of heroes who participated in the Argonautic expedition, setting sail for the mythical land of Colchis under the command of the leader Jason, in order to find the legendary Golden Fleece. This story unravels years before the Trojan War, when King Perseus of Iolcus died, and Peleus usurped the throne from his half-brother Aeson. However, he was told of a prophecy, according to which a descendant of Aeolus would seek revenge for his acts, killing every possible descendant of Aeolus. Peleus spared his half-brother and incarcerated him. Aeson married Alcimede. That Alcimede. I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar with her name. Who gave birth to Jason, faking her newborn's death to trick Peleus. She managed to hide her son in an area near Mount Pelion, where where the centaur Chiron raised and nurtured him. As a young man, Jason returned to the Iolcus under Hera's command. He attended a sacrifice to Poseidon, where Peleus and other kings were present. And his uncle recognized him. Unable to kill him in front of so many guests, Peleus told him to fetch the Golden Fleece, which was hanging from a tree somewhere in the faraway land of Colchis. This venture sounded impossible, as the fleece was guarded by a never-sleeping dragon. In fact, Peleus was so certain the mission would fail that he swore he would give up the throne if Jason returned with the Golden Fleece. Over 80 brave companions signed up for the journey Jason set out to complete. The expedition eventually succeeded. Helped by Hera, and Jason returned with his companions to Iolcus. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard of the Iliad. The Iliad is one of the oldest and most significant works in Western literature, attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer. This epic poem delves into the events of the Trojan War, focusing on the wrath of the Greek hero Achilles and its catastrophic consequences. Composed in dactylic hexameter, the poem has been a cornerstone in the study of Greek mythology, literature, and ancient history, offering profound insights into the human condition, honor, and the whims of the gods. The narrative is set during the 10th and final year of the Trojan War. A protracted siege of the city of Troy, also known as Iliad, by a coalition of Greek states. The war was instigated by the abduction of Helen of Troy by the Trojan prince Perseus, an act that spurred her husband, King Menelaus of Sparta, and his brother Agamemnon to launch a massive military expedition to retrieve her. The poem introduces a myriad of legendary figures, both mortal and divine. On the Greek side, prominent warriors include Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, and Diomedes. The Trojans are led by noble figures such as Hector, Aeneas, and King Priam. The gods frequently intervened, taking sides and influencing the outcome of battles, highlighting the belief in divine involvement in human affairs. The central theme of the Iliad revolves around Achilles' anger towards Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces. After Agamemnon demands Achilles' war prize, the maiden Perseus as compensation for returning his own captive Chryseis to appease Apollo. Achilles feels dishonored and withdraws from battle. His absence had dire consequences for the Greek army, shifting the tide in favor of the Trojans. Desperate to repel the Trojans, Achilles' close friend and companion Patroclus dons Achilles' armor and leads the Myrmidons into battle. Patroclus is slain by Hector, igniting a fierce desire for vengeance in Achilles, overcome with grief and rage. Achilles reconciles with Agamemnon and returns to the battlefield, setting the stage for a climactic confrontation with Hector. The epic reaches its peak as Achilles and Hector face each other outside the walls of Troy. Despite Hector's bravery, he is ultimately defeated and killed by Achilles. In a display of wrath and disregard for honorable conduct, Achilles desecrates Hector's body by dragging it behind his chariot. This act reflects the profound impact of personal loss and the erosion of moral values in the throes of war. Moved by divine intervention, Achilles allows King Priam to ransom his son's body. Their poignant encounter brings a moment of compassion and humanity amidst the brutality of war. The funeral of Hector provides a somber conclusion to the poem, emphasizing the shared suffering of both Greeks and Trojans. Throughout the Iliad, the gods play a pivotal role, frequently intervening in human affairs. Athena, Hera, Apollo, and Zeus, among others, take sides and manipulate events to favor the chosen heroes. This interplay highlights the ancient Greek belief in the gods' capricious nature and the direct influence on mortal destiny. The madness of Ajax. After the death of Achilles, his mother Thetis decided to award his beautiful armor to the bravest of the remaining Greeks under Troy. Ajax and Odysseus were the clear favorites to get it from the outset. Not only both of them were accomplished and fearsome warriors in their own right, but also it was none other than them who courageously managed to defend the body of Achilles after his heel was pierced by an arrow of Paris. Expectedly, these two were the only ones who dared to come forward and make a claim for Achilles' armor. It was left to Agamemnon, the leader of the Achaeans, to make the final decision. Now, some say that, as far as Agamemnon was concerned, this decision wasn't at all problematic. Apparently, Ajax had offended Athena by rejecting her help during one of the fights under Troy. And it would have been more than irreverent on part of the Greeks to insult her yet again by siding with a hubristic hero. Others, however, think that Agamemnon didn't want to cause any problems, so he chose to delegate his decision to an assembly of either Greek or Trojan warriors, which eventually decided in the favor of Odysseus. Yet a third group claims that on the advice of Nestor, he sent spies by night to overhear the Trojans' unbiased opinion of the heroes, and at least according to the findings, it appeared that the Trojans admired Odysseus' bravery much more than they did Ajax. Ajax didn't take that decision lightly. On the contrary, he started planning his revenge the minute he heard it. However, Athena, aware of the severe consequences of such a revenge, struck Ajax with madness, and before he knew it, the great Greek hero found himself in the middle of a crowd of shapes. Thinking them as fellow fighters, Ajax stormed against them, slaughtering hundreds and injuring and imprisoning many others. Unfortunately for him, the shapes were in fact flocks of Trojan sheep and herds of innocent cows. When Ajax came to his senses, he found himself flocking a horned pram with a horse's halter, shouting "Treacherous Odysseus" to him. Around him, a pool of blood and many beheaded animals. Ajax felt so humiliated at the sight that he immediately resolved to kill himself. But before that, he decided to leave a message, appointing his half-brother Teucer to be the legal guardian of Zeus, his son, Betagmessa. Next, he took his sword, the one he had gotten from none other than Hector, during a ceremonial weapon exchange of respect, and he buried it upright in the earth. Odysseus took everything from me, he sighed regretfully. This is at least my own, lest any man but Ajax vanquish Ajax. After calling on the Erinyes to avenge him, Ajax threw himself on the sword. Ovid says that once Ajax's blood touched the ground, a strange new hyacinth-like flower suddenly sprang from the ground. The ensanguined earth, he writes eloquently, sprouted from a green turf, that purple flower which grew of old from hyacinthine blood. Its petals now charged with double fright, the warrior's name, Apollo's cry of woe. It is quite possible that Ovid is referring to Fritillary, a small, nodding, bell-shaped purple flower resembling a lily. Its petals are marked with spots which look as if they spell the Greek letters I. And this is not only a cry of woe, but also the Greek vocative form of Ajax. Finally, some say that these letters can also stand for Aias, or Ajax the Hyacinth.